welcome to One Table. I'm David. This is Chris, Juice, Justin, aka Juice, Fred. We are here today to answer some questions, begin this conversation that we're calling One Table. But I guess the first question that I have for us is, what is One Table? What does One Table mean to all of you?
Yeah, I'll go. I'll start. One table means for me that when we are not of one mind, we should be able to be of one heart. I feel like that's what we have found with each other. We've had lots of hard conversations with each other over the years, and often we don't agree, but we never walk away from those disagreements disconnected.
Right.
And I feel like my hope for this podcast is going to be what we have found with each other, that other people are going to find that, and that's what especially the church, the body of Christ, needs to find with each other.
Yeah, that's good. What you, Chris?
Short and sweet. All right. Well, to me, like, you think about a table. Tables are used as a place of fellowship, and communion. Like, whenever you need to have a meeting with somebody, you go find a table somewhere to eat. Food helps gather us. But we all know, especially with us, we all like food. But we all,
what you trying to say?
But we all, and even some of us like the same food, but we have certain preferences with that same food.
Some of us have more preferences than others.
And that'll be me. That's fine.
Listen, no cheese on, no tomato, no.
So we all like food, and we all like some of the same foods, but we have different preferences with that.
Okay.
So I think with this one table, it's meaning, hey, we can all be at the same table and we can bring our different preferences. We all like food, so we all have a common goal, but kind of the way we go about it may be a little different. That's kind of how I think of the one tableness. The table brings us together, but while we're at the table, we are able to have different dishes, and everybody respects everybody's preferences on their dish, but we still having the common unity of the table.
That's good.
Yep.
Yeah, to just bounce off of that, the idea of sharing the table, it was deeply meaningful in the time of the early church, and just thinking that's why people were offended that Jesus was sharing the table with some of the people he shared the table with.
Yeah.
But as I was thinking forward to this podcast and these conversations and the idea of one table, really was thinking about like Acts 10, where Peter has that vision of the sheet that comes down from the sky. And there's all the different meats on there that were unclean, but it wasn't just about what was going to be on the table. Really, it was about who was going to have a seat at the table, because he didn't go to all meat buffet after that. He went to Cornelius' house, and God blew the door open to ministry to the Gentiles and people that weren't Jews. And yet you see how easy it is to drift back to sameness, because in Galatians 2, he gets reprimanded by Paul for when the Jews are around, he goes to sit with the Jews, right?
Yeah.
Back to people that maybe not even just look like you, but think like you, vote like you. It's so easy to build echo chambers, halls of mirrors, right? And that doesn't just hurt your growth as an individual, it hurts the church, it hurts the culture. So for me, like, the idea of one table is who has a seat at that table. And hopefully if you're hosting a table, it's people that don't always think like you, don't look like you, don't always vote like you, and yet you can still share a table with them and be in unity.
I like it.
That's good.
David, come on.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to the rest of you guys. I feel like the idea of one table, right? Like there's a place of unity. It's one table, and yet there are many seats or multiple seats at the table, where everybody at the table gets to retain their individuality and their preferences, like you guys have been saying about just different dishes and different perspectives that you bring. For me, I think, one way we can look at this table is a metaphor of the church, that there's one church and many parts, or, one body, many parts. And in a similar kind of way, there's really one table that we as the church, all of us are Christians here, right? That we belong to or come to, where we talk, where we live. And yet, when we come to that table, we get to retain our individuality. We get to retain the things that make us us. And so while the table is a symbol of unity, it's not a symbol of uniformity.
That's good.
Right? That there's a oneness to it that people can see visually, but also hopefully that there's a diversity that people can see and that we can experience and protect as we have these conversations with each other. So, yeah, so that's one table.
I like it.
So I guess the next question then kind of out of that is what brings you specifically to this table? If one table for us means a place where we all come together as we are, why are we here? What's the purpose? What's the point of coming to this specific table?
I know for me, we all bring our life experiences to this table with the variety of topics that we're going to talk about. But I look at it like this. Yeah, we have the table, and sometimes we're going to be coming to the table to just eat, but sometimes we may have to come to the table to flip it.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of...
Or bust it.
Yeah, right. Or clean some stuff up. And I just know that's kind of how I am as a person. Like sometimes I'm there to just eat, and sometimes I'm there to agitate it. Sometimes I'm there to, hey, let's move this table around. Yeah. So I think that's kind of what I bring to the table. That's like my, just with history and then with what I do, doing music and stuff. So being able to be the creative that I am, bring that element to it. And of course, through the lens of, the gospel, I think that's part of my experience that I'll bring to the table. Just adding more to the gumbo of all the stuff that's at the table to eat. That's good. What about you, Juice?
Next. I guess I would say just an ongoing passion for unity and unity amidst diversity. My mom always likes to point back to when I was like 7 years old in our Dodge Caravan, just shouted up to the front of the van randomly, hey, why don't we have any black friends? Just and she was taken aback. It was one of those kids say the darndest things that she's never forgotten. And it was just like at 7, I already realized like society is so separate.
Yeah.
Like whether it's churches or districting, whatever it is, or for whatever reason at 7, I didn't understand all those things. So much was separate. But what you don't understand at 7 is you just assume it's all equal. But then as you come up, you realize, I was raised in a culture where white is the baseline, it's the norm, it's the standard. Yeah. And I got to live with that, dare I say, privilege, right? And white privilege doesn't mean that we didn't have lumps. My father was a carpenter, blue collar family, but those lumps and those hard times were never caused by the color of my skin.
Yeah.
So, that I've never lost that heart. I know my mom had a powerful conversation with me last summer because she homeschooled us homeschooled me through middle school. And she was like, do you think we failed you? Because she taught me history. And there was so much missing.
Wow.
And my parents had been on a journey where they were reading like Just Mercy, Stand from the Beginning.
In this last year you're talking about?
Yeah, the last 2 years or so. And really wrestling with repentance, wrestling with what do we do now? And that just speaks to like the wrestling we have to do, especially as white people. And those were people I shared tables with as a kid. So that's why I'm here, I guess was the question.
Yeah, why are you here?
Yeah.
I think, or, what brings you to the table? I think for me, just, it's 2021 and the climate in our country of just tension, racial tension around racism and words like white supremacy and privilege and things like that are coming up in, kind of like the cultural ethos or whatever, like, are kind of forcing people to have these conversations. Right. And I know for me, it's been really eye-opening in light of, these past really 10 years of seeing on full display on social media, injustices, right? Like the killing of unarmed black men by police, like seeing that in living color in real time has affected me, right, in a way that has been deep. And then I look around on Facebook or wherever, and I see that a lot of my Christian brothers and sisters aren't feeling the same or are struggling to understand why I feel the way I feel. And so I know that for me in the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, just been kind of coming to the table more and more to not ignore what's going on out there in the world, in our culture, but to talk about it and to just, I think sometimes the church, quote unquote, with a capital C, we do a bad job of coming to the table around issues like this that I'm talking about, right? Like racism and white privilege, and we come to the table for communion, and we kind of ignore our diverse perspectives there, and then we leave and we don't talk about the other stuff. And at the end of the day, we all live in this flesh. We all are a part of this world, and so we have to come to the table more often than communion. Obviously, this is not to replace that, but it's to supplement that. Anyway, what about you?
Yeah, I think I will say two things. I want to, what you just said about communion just resonated with me. This isn't supposed to replace, obviously, the Lord's Supper, right? Because of the sacredness of that. But this is supposed to be the fruit of the Lord's Supper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that if we're sharing in that meal, we should be willing to share in these tables.
Right. Because the disciples, right, they met for more than just communion. Like when they broke bread together, when the Bible talks about breaking bread, it is for communion, but also it's for conversations like this, real life conversations. So
communion didn't scatter.
Right.
Communion gathered.
Right.
And so I might preach on that soon.
Right.
Somebody, we should have a little pad we can write that down.
Right.
I'm here. I think there's two things. I've been thinking about this question a lot. One of them is I want to talk about where I've come from as a person and a man, and then I want to talk about where I'm going. And just, I wasn't planning on sharing this, but as I was listening to you all share, my father, passed away in 2014, and so part of his passing was going through all the photos, all the we've got black and white films.
Right.
We went and found I guess is it 8mm projector at a thrift store down here off of Main Street, so we could play some of those movies. We hung a sheet up, a big white sheet in our dining room at my mom's house, and we're just watching them. And I remember coming across a photo of my dad. They had just built the house that I grew up in. My mom still lives there today, down in Verina. And they were so proud of that first home, and he had just, the photo looks like he had just put the mailbox in, which is across the street from the house, different mailbox, same spot as it was probably in the early 60s when they built that house. And in the photo behind my dad, there's a little Confederate flag emblem on the mailbox. Now, if you knew my father, you would have that's never been a part of his journey and his story, right? He's always been one of the most loving, caring men that you would ever meet. He wasn't a Christ follower then, and that happened in the probably early 70s. And but it's just a reminder to me that there is something subtle. There was an undercurrent in my life growing up that was not overt, right? But it's part of my story, right? It's part of my history as a person. And so I'm growing out of that, and I'm learning to recognize that even though no one told me that people of color were less, it was a feeling that was understood that we never talked about.
Right.
The pool, the neighborhood pool that, was called Anarav because we're clever. That's Verina spelled backwards. And because that's how we roll in Verina, right? I remember as a teenager, there were no people of color at this pool. Now, I went to Verina High School was a very diverse high school back then, right? But there were no people of color at that pool, and it never crossed my mind, not one time, right? And I remember being a teenager hearing my parents talking about this controversy that was at the pool because a black family had applied, and the pool was trying to figure out how they could tell them no.
Wow.
Because, that
Wow.
you lived in two worlds, right? And I remember thinking that's odd, but it didn't bother me. Right? It didn't bother me, and it should have, right? So I hope that that's what I'm going to bring to this table, or conversations about where I've been. I would say where I'm going is just this passion and frustration that just because we're not with each other doesn't mean that we can't be for each other. Warren Matthews, one of my dear friends who we met when we first came here to Newport News, he and his wife Sandy, he would always say that to me: Fred, when you're right, I'm with you, and when you're wrong, I'm for you.
Right.
That was his way of saying, our relationship is never at risk. And we are now in a society, I've been a part of it, regrettably, as part of my confession, is that if you're not with me, then I'm going to be against you.
Wow.
And we're fed that from pulpits. We're fed that from cable news networks. Right? Yeah. We're fed that in our political arenas and just in our communities. And so part of what I want to bring is talking about my journey of learning that even if someone's not with me, I can still be for them. So good. And I think society, especially the Christian community, has got to rediscover that, because they had it in the early church. And the last thing I'll say is Acts 15, where the first big disagreement in the church, right? The Judaizers going up to Antioch and giving Paul and Barnabas trouble, and so their response to these Judaizers was, if God has accepted someone by giving them His Holy Spirit, who are we to reject them? And we've got to rediscover that as the body of Christ.
That's so good.
To as you were talking about being how we can not agree with you but still being for you, I think that's another thing that I believe I'm bringing to the table with my experience as a Black person that does a lot of things, and throughout my whole life done a lot of things in majority white spaces. And in America, in our society, when you see a Black person that operates in a lot of majority white spaces, most of the time you think multiple things, but mainly it's that person there is a token, and they are there, and they are strictly there for financial gain, and they're assimilating to the majority culture, which is a white culture. And I want to be able to be an example of, no, that's not the case with me. You may think it is because of what you see on the outside, but once you get inside and see what I'm actually doing, I'm actually here resisting the system at all costs. So I'm not here to assimilate into just being here for financial self-gain, thinking that white is right. So now I've achieved because now I'm in majority white spaces.
Right.
And then I'm staying here. So most people think that when you see a Black person in a majority space, they're being held there because they don't want to lose money, or they're there because they think that that's the better way or that's the best way. And that's not what I'm doing. And that's a big thing that I wrestle, not internally, but with outside people, with them understanding why I'm where I am doing what I do. So that's another thing that I'm bringing to the table, that perspective of, no, I can be here and challenge the system without throwing away everybody that's there at the table. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I can still be at the table with you without throwing you away, because just like we as Black people don't want majority white America, or just the world period, to think that Black people are monolithic. We can't do the same thing with white people.
Exactly, yeah.
All white people are not such and such. Just like all Black people are not such and such. All Asian American people are not such and such. So being able to bring that perspective to the table and doing it genuinely without, oh, he's just saying that because he don't want to get fired. You know what I'm saying? Like, being able to bring that true, authentic perspective is another big thing that I hope to bring to the table.
Yeah, I think maybe we can stay on that, because we kind of started getting into it already with your story about just growing up in Verina and what you just shared, Chris. But specifically, there are things that draw us to this table, but when we come here, we there are things that we bring, right? Perspective, history, experience. And you touched on a lot of that, Chris. So, like, I know for me, and I'm glad that you brought up the fact that, the Black community is not, like, monolithic. for me, what I bring to this table is the fact that I am, I'm a black man, but I'm a biracial black man who has spent the majority of my life in predominantly white spaces.
Right.
I mean, I was born in West Philadelphia, and I've always lived in black neighborhoods growing up. But when I moved to Virginia in middle school, predominantly white schools and predominantly white church. And I know that for me, for all of my life, being a biracial man, living in predominantly black neighborhoods, but being raised by a white mom, right? Like I have had to my entire life had this conversation. The white side of me and the black side of me have had to talk a lot throughout my life to kind of bring reconciliation and to figure stuff out. And so for me, I in order to exist, I've had to hold in tension these two, I guess, sides or perspectives or traditions, two worlds. And so I bring that because, I think the reality is that even if you are biracial in America, you could look at the 1-drop rule, you could look at 1/8 rule, whatever. But if you got a little bit of black in you, you black, right? And so when people see me and they hear me talk about things like this, the immediate perspective is, well, you haven't weighed the other side. And I have to, So that's part of it for me. And then just touching on that piece about just being in predominantly white spaces, what's different for me and you, Chris, is like you've grown up in the black church and I haven't. Like I've grown up in the white church, and I there definitely have been times in the past, few years where I'm like, have I made the wrong choice, right? Like, would it be more comfortable for me to be in another space where my skin color and wouldn't be a hindrance or an obstacle? But I'm committed, to this evangelical tradition that I've grown up in. I've realized there are a lot of political things that have attached themselves to evangelicalism.
No.
You
It's
don't
true.
say.
That aren't so healthy. But in terms of like theologically, the evangelical tradition, like I'm with that most of it. And so I'm trying to be a redeeming voice, a repentant voice within this tradition. I don't want to leave, and bring people with me. I want to stay and have conversations about how can we be better as an evangelical church. So that's what I'm bringing to the table.
Well, yeah, if we're talking perspectives you bring to the table, I mean, I would start by saying I have a limited perspective, and then let me come full circle. If I don't get distracted by the fact you said West Philadelphia, and now the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air song is playing. I was waiting for it. Can't even think straight anymore. But I already talked about, I was homeschooled through 8th grade. Went to high school and was a knucklehead. And then I went to college at William & Mary, and my roommates in college were black. So just because I was hanging out with them, they're my best friends. They eat lunch in the Office of Multicultural Affairs every day. So I was eating lunch in the Office of Multicultural Affairs every day. And they'd, turn off Madden and go to an African-American Male Coalition meeting. So I'd be like, all right, let me go help plan some events. So I was at African-American Male Coalition meetings and a lot of African Cultural Society events. So I say that because in college, just simply by loving my friends, I came to realize, there are many different experiences outside of my own. Obviously, we kind of grasp that, but then when you actually begin to do life with them, you realize just how different they are. My best man, born and raised in Brooklyn, and then I made another friend in college that immigrated from Ethiopia. Their two life experiences are vastly different, and they all have different perspectives based on those. And then also when you're married, where you get to choose what you learn, taking African-American history classes and African-American literature classes, where you realize, there's a history I didn't even fully learn. Not always pretty things. Some of the stuff that's been swept under the rug that I didn't learn, when I was K through 12. And so just that was a big experience in college. And so then I go and get saved my senior year. So this whole kind of socio-political transformation happened right as I became a Christian. So you talk about attachments. I didn't really settle into some of the white evangelical or nationalist leanings
until after.
But I've also had the privilege of doing church with people, again, that have vastly different perspectives, not just based on skin color. Planted a church with a sheriff and a police officer, right? I don't wake up every day putting on a badge, hoping to love my neighbor, serve my community, with all the risks attached to that. I don't know what that's like. Right. And I don't know what it's like to wake up a black man. And as I talk to some of my friends, hug my wife longer and my kids tighter because somebody who looked like me just didn't make it home yesterday. Right. So I don't know that. And again, part of the power of one table is I've been at tables with people that have different perspectives. And you realize my perspective, it might not be wrong, right? Yeah. Because it's based on my valid life experience, but it's so narrow. You can just widen the lens by doing life with people that, again, are different than you. Their perspectives are different. They might vote different, and it's not wrong. Yeah, it's just based on how their entire life experience. So, again, I have a limited perspective, but you just realize when you sit at these tables how it adds to it.
Yeah. What I want to know is, at what point in college did you start wearing them do-rags and fitteds? Because I seen the pictures.
Because I would have been cut up by everybody I hung out with.
It's like, let's do that. No, that's good. The perspective aspect of it, like talking about kind of your upbringing and stuff. What a lot of people don't know about me is that this living life through a diverse lens is not something that just happened 6-7 years ago. I went to a private white Christian school from kindergarten all the way to 6th grade. So I was and it was a K through 12 school. So out of the whole school, it was probably 5 black kids the whole time that I was there, fluctuating in and out. So I grew up going to school, a private Christian school with white people all day, and then going to all black church NAACP meetings on the evening. So my life has always been a life of diverse living. So it's not like, oh, this is just something that I just got on 6-7 years ago. Like, I've been doing that my whole life. So I have a perspective of growing up in that kind of environment, growing up in 2 different environments, because I would have to go to school. My white Christian school didn't talk about anything about Black History Month. Yeah. But then I would go to church and we be talking about that for a whole month. Just different things. Like, I mean, the songs that we sang for chapel at my white Christian school were nothing like the songs I sang on Sunday morning at church. Even dressing for church. I mean, in the black tradition, you go to church on Sunday, you wearing really good clothes, you dress up. On chapel, I'll never forget, it was Wednesdays. I would be dressing up for chapel and everybody else got flip-flops and shorts. And I'm like, we going to church. What are y'all doing? So I've always been able to be in 2 worlds at the same time. Right. I would get teased by my black church friends because I was doing stuff that society would say white people do. Like, I grew up playing soccer and field hockey. Like, black people don't do that. Not supposed to do that. But then I would get teased by the white kids at my school because I would wear, that was in the late 80s, so I was wearing medallions and I had a Gumby haircut, like Bobby Brown. So they were like, what is wrong with your hair? So I would catch it from every angle so that I have a perspective that a lot of people don't necessarily get to live with, you know what I mean? So like, that's when we were just talking about perspective that you're bringing to this table. I think I'm bringing that as well. So this is not something that that's new. This is really a lived experience, you know what I mean? So, yeah. One table. We here.
We here.
This is the table. This is the table.
It's been good. Anything anybody want to add? Or
no, man.
Little shout out to Vanessa for making these shelves look nice.
It looked good in here.
We had a little help.
So a little help.
With the interior design.
It wasn't us.
The answer to that is no.
With the interior design.
I don't know if we'll be like recommending books every podcast. Yeah. Obviously, we highlight some up here. We got some back here. But you guys just talking again and again about 2 worlds. And what is it? Between the World and Me is a great book. You want to just, again, broaden that perspective.
Ooh. Oh, you throwing them in all the way.
Right.
I like books. I might recommend one every pod. We'll see.
Ooh, all right. Read that one, and then you're going to have to come back for the follow-up.
Yeah, there you go.
You're going to be hurt.
I'll give a nod to The Color of Law. That was a turning point book for
That's
me.
Good.
A turning point book for me. A light went off when I read that. So
That's good.
I know our good friend Steve Ruggiero would say for him when he read The Myth of
Myth of
Equality,
Equality.
a light went off for him.
Such a good book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good balance of history and theology, I think. It's good.
So I hope One Table becomes that for people.
Yeah.
A light will go off for them.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
We're here.
We here.
We doing it.
Yes, we are.
Yep. So I guess this it, huh?
That's it.
I guess we'll see them next time at the table, huh?
We'll see you next time.
At the table. One table.
One table.
One.
Change.